It's a good start, actually. You can remind yourself if you go home or if you go into a shop or you be on the streets of Vilnius or wherever you're living in, that you might get in contact with the person you see and say a nice word. Hey, nice dress you're wearing today. Or you have a good energy. Or, well, let me give you a hug. That's a little bit further, but some people do that. So let me talk today about why mindfulness is important for business, society, and self. Mindfulness is an interesting word, which I don't really understand yet. Sometimes I think mindfulness has been misused in a lot of cases, but let's explore what mindfulness is for you. I don't want to give you a definition, but I think everybody needs to understand it by him or herself. A little bit of my background, my professional background, my footprints, as I call it. So I started as a manager, vice president for Southeast Asia for a German media company, Bertelsmann. You might know, not Bertelsmann, but you might know some of these companies like Random House, RTL Group, Avorto Group, BMG was the former music group of Bertelsmann. They are operating worldwide, and in 1998, 1999, they also explored, like a lot of others, the internet. So they said, wow, we saw a little company called Amazon, and they are becoming very successful. So we need to look into this market. So they sent me over to Asia, that I was working for Bertelsmann, establishing internet businesses in Southeast Asia, which we did in Japan, so I was living in Japan, which we did in China and in Korea as well. And in Korea, I was on a board of a company called Daum Communication, which is still existing in Korea, and it's one of the biggest portals there. And I was working for them when Bertelsmann decided internet has no future anymore. That was in 2001, 2002, because the bubble exploded and a lot of companies said, oh, internet, that was one of the trends. It's no longer really important for us. So they closed everything down. And I was working for Daum Communication in Korea at that time, and they said, why don't you be responsible for our international expansion? Which I did, and I worked for them, which brought me in 2004 to Boston, Massachusetts, where I was working as a CEO for a search company called Lycos. Lycos was one of the first search engines in the world, before Google even. So the search algorithm, which Google is using and every search engine in the world is using, has been developed by a professor of Carnegie Mellon University in Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh. And they called it Lycos because Lycos is a Greek word for wolf spider. So it's a spider, wolf spider, and the wolf spider is catching their enemies in their net and bringing it to one particular place. This is how the algorithm is working. You put something in, you know it from Google, you put a question in, a queries in, and then it searches the net and then it brings you back the result. That is what actually Lycos discovered, but at that time nobody knew that search can make any money, so Lycos was sold to the Korean company. So that brought me to Boston, Massachusetts. And at that time, I became to know Larry and Sergey from Google. And they then later on gave me an offer to go to Google in Dublin, where I was responsible for Scandinavia and for Benelux. And what I appreciated, that's why I spoke about my journey, is that I always worked cross cultures, that I always worked with very young people, and that this was important for me to understand them So not to take my personal ego and my opinion as, okay, this is what I need to do. It's more about understanding what is important for them, what is important for the other culture. How do they understand how to work together, how to live together? And that has a lot to do, from my perspective, with mindfulness. But the world we are seeing today is, we have an environmental crisis, we have a financial crisis, and we see a lot of, people who are stressed out. I don't know whether one of the audience here have experienced that once you are in your businesses, that you sometimes feel really exhausted and stressed out. And you have a lot of depression rate. So I think from the environmental part, we see that, I think I don't have to go too deep into this because everybody knows that we are no longer connected actually with nature. And that's why we are using nature as a resource more and more. And that brings us in very critical situations worldwide. On the financial part, I think, the United Nations recently had a report saying that 8 people in this world have more accumulated wealth than the bottom 50% of our world population. So you have 8 people here and you have 3.5 billion people here. So that is, and that is not really sustainable for the future. And a lot of rich people commit that. They said, yeah, we have to change that. We have to do something against this. This is not sustainable. And on the depression side, we are facing more and more people who are in deep depression or committing suicide. And most of these people, and these numbers, are in the so-called developed countries, so in the industrial world, which shows us that material wealth and, consciousness and mindfulness and happiness has no really direct relation to each other. So Peter Drucker, he was a management consultant, very famous management consultant person. He said we are living in an age of discontinuity. And we have to, it's a very ambiguous world. And I don't know whether this word came across you, but it's been used a lot recently. In the business world, it's saying VUCA. VUCA is volatility, it's uncertainty, it's complexity, and it's ambiguity. And that creates a lot of discomfort. And we see that currently in the business world more and more. That in former times, you had a strategy department, and you had consultants and your own people, and they did a strategy for the next 5 years of the companies. They worked on it for half a year, they put it in a book, the book was given to the people and said, okay, here is the strategy of the company. And then the structure and the organization of the company was, aligned to that strategy. And that was fine. For the next 5 years at least, this was the direction these guys followed. Nowadays, you are facing a situation where on quarterly, so every 3 months, you have a tremendous change. And you have a very disruptive change. You see big companies who have existed for years and decades are no longer existing. And you saw that companies like Google, who are only in the market since 15, 20 years now, they are actually one of the so-called most valuable companies in the world. And they're bringing out products per product in technology, and that is changing rapidly the way we're going to interact with each other. So, what can we do in this market? You probably have read what Einstein was saying, a problem cannot be solved at the same level of thinking that created it. So we should develop a substantially new manner if human mankind is to survive. So which means what we are doing currently is applying the same kind of methods, the same kind of thinking. I don't know, you guys have experienced in 2008 the financial crisis. And that was the same thing, you know. They brought the banks together in Germany, where I'm coming from. The government brought the representative from the banks together and said, how can we solve this crisis? And that were exactly the people who created it. It was so interesting. I was speechless. I was saying, okay, that's interesting. So they bring these folks together and they created the same kind of system again. What we're seeing right now. We see there is a real estate bubble, and we're seeing the banks are pumping money, and we're seeing CEOs are getting, especially from the financial industry, they're getting bonuses which are skyrocketing, you know. So it's not really. So we have really to think about something else. And where does this something else come from? It comes from the roots of ourself. It comes from the roots of our inner soul, of our understanding, who we are. Why are we here in this world for? And what are we facing, and what have we do together? And for that, you know, I think we have to step back to look at the larger picture of the economic system. We saw in the former times industrialization, and before industrialization, we had hierarchy and control. So very top down. You know, here's the structure, this is what to do, everybody had a clear place and a role in this world, and this is what was needed to do. Then, with industrialization, it came a free market. You know, everything was possible, regardless, and everything has a price and a number behind it. So, which came with an increasing wealth in this world, materialization. But also it came with damages in ecology. It came with slavery, it came with massive disruptions and inequalities. So a lot of externality costs. And now we are in an area of negotiations. So we have an ecosystem where we know it's no longer, you know, accepted if I'm going into a bank and rob the bank. You know, it's not accepted. In former times, it kind of was when you were the strongest one. Now you have to negotiate. You negotiate with the unions, you negotiate with the other stakeholders who are in your ecosystem, and you're trying to find a situation which is acceptable for everybody. That's a time for negotiation. Most of the countries have that. In some countries, you still see the top-down approach or so it varies a little bit, but you have that, this is the direction we're going to go. And the next step is really co-creation, co-creative. So we are getting together as a community. We are getting together as partners, as friends. We are not seeing us as the center of the universe and the world, but we are seeing us as a part of all living species in this world. And we are trying to find a way, how can we live in this world together with our differences? So what we need is a wisdom at work. On an individual level, we have, you know, you see the VUCA, the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. So what is volatility? Needs a vision. Where do we want to go? How do we want to live together? And uncertainty needs an understanding. Why are we doing what we're doing? And where am I be a part of this? And how can I co-create, be an active part of what we try to create? Complexity. We need clarity. We don't need something like, oh, digitization will completely change the way we're going to live together, and everybody is frightened and fearing what to do. And it's not only, you know, the employees, it's also the CEOs and the executives are meeting in this world. They are saying, Alfred, I know we have to do something in technology, in digitization, but we don't know what and how. So we do something, just to do something. And I'm saying, that's probably not the right way to approach it. Understand who you are, understand what you want, and then decide from that place without fear. And that is clarity. Ambiguity, being agile, being flexible. Flexibility is what nature shows us. Nature is flexible and, it's adapting. And we are part of nature. That is what we can work on with individuals. With companies, as I mentioned, it's aligned strategy, structure, and culture to high performance. I recently spoke to a person professor in Stanford University, and he was saying, Alfred, I know culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I said, well, I hope it tastes well, but the question is, what does it mean for companies? As I said, the main important thing is really the culture. How to create a culture of transparency, of responsibility, of trust, of reliance, of clarity. And then, based on that culture, you can create a strategy. Based on that strategy, you can create a structure. And then you can become successful. That is actually a method what you see in a lot of successful companies around the world, that they're applying this model more and more. And if you want to attract really interesting people, young people who would like to join your company, you have to give them the first question when I was working at Google was, what are you doing for my personal development? What are you doing for my professional development? What is the impact what I have when I'm working here in the world in a broader sense? What is the meaning of your company? What is the purpose of your company? What are you doing? That were the questions. It's not about, when can I come to the VP position? How much money do I earn? That came later. The first was these questions, and that is about culture. And where does it start? Like always, with yourself. So not looking into the stars and seeing, okay, we're going to go there, tomorrow's maybe next. Let's see. So see, where is the Mars in us? Or where are we? Looking at yourself. And for that, this is a very busy slide, but for that, I think it's important to see what makes the difference is the bottom part of the iceberg. It's not the upper part. The upper part is what we mainly discuss, when we're going into companies and we're discussing with them about, okay, organization, processes, professional expertise, what can you bring to the table in this particular role, what you want to do. But what more and more comes into play is kind of your identity, your values, your meaning, your visions, your beliefs. Who are you? Why did you choose that company and not that company? And how does this relate to your personal meaning and your personal values and emotion? What are the holy cows in the company? Sometimes very important to see what are the blind spots, what nobody dares to tap into. And that is, if you see the leverage, that is actually the most leverage of a company. If you don't have that, if you don't understand that, the identity of the people, but the identity of the whole organization, then you probably won't be successful in the future, by any means. So, what is reality? If we know that reality is more this kind of meaning and values, which is untouchable, but which is very important, we understand that we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. If I'm looking, when I was in Japan and I walked, sometimes I was really surprised to see people standing in front of a flower, he was trash, and he was a nice flower, and they were looking at the flower and said, oh, how beautiful. And I was always looking at the picture and I said, but there's trash beside that. But they said, yeah, but if you concentrate on the flower, you get that energy and you can transform that place. And I was like, wow, this is an interesting way how to see the world, you know, focusing on the beautiful things. But I saw it different than they saw, so I have to work on myself. And by working on myself and seeing it differently, I may be able also to help others to see the world differently. And this is a lot by opening your mind. So, you know probably The Little Prince, where it said, grown-ups never understand anything by themselves. And it is tiresome for children to be always and forever explaining things to them. And that is what I often experience when you have children. You might have experienced that your children are standing in front of you with question mark in their eyes, and they saying, why don't you understand this? And sometimes I recognized, we have 2 daughters, and I recognized, yes, actually she's right. I was so much educated in a certain way that I saw the world just in this direction. But here's somebody much younger, with less experience, but with a broader view on the world and a broader wisdom in their heart. So they teach me how to see the world in a much broader way. Which means, if water flows uphill, if I tell you that, there are probably some people who studied nature science here. They would say, this is not possible, Alfred, because there is the gravitation right, the right for gravitation, law, gravitation law. So, but really good scientists might say, I knew up to now that this is not possible, but if I take that into consideration, if I might think and let the thought realize that water can flow uphill, what would that mean for my personal worldview and for the world which we want to create? And this is actually how new ideas are opening up. This is, you might have heard about design thinking, innovation, creativity. That is how a lot of people actually are, or companies are looking into things. I did a workshop a year ago with BMW, some executives there, and I said, what would be your company if you guys would not produce cars anymore from tomorrow? And they said nothing. And I said, that's an interesting thought. So you think a company which is 150 years old are only reduced to cars. That's interesting. So we thought about that differently. And at Google, this is where, at Google X, the ideas are coming from when people are saying, okay, what is a car standing for? It's not about creating a better car, it's about what is the car representing. The car is representing mobility. Okay, mobility, what does it mean, mobility? You can do mobility in different ways. You can go with a car, with a bicycle, you can go with your mind somewhere else, that's also mobility. You can call somebody, that's mobility in a way. So mobility has a lot of aspects, and maybe more than we have even discovered now. If we do that, if we think about that, let's think about the next evolution. What could that mean? And that is design thinking. That is to accept that water might flow uphill. And this starts really with your heart and your intuition. It didn't start with your cognitive abilities. There is an interesting study from Stanford or Harvard, one of these universities there, is saying, where does innovation come from? Nobel Prize winners. And they found out that these folks never discovered innovation in front of their computer. Never. Most of them under the shower, when they're working in the forest. So it's about And that was not about why they're thinking about it, it was why they're letting free, they're letting come, they're letting connect with themselves with a new idea. And that is letting connect with your heart. It's with your understanding your inner core. And your inner core is connecting with a lot of things. And that is a quiet mind is able to hear intuition over fear. And here comes mindfulness in. That's the quietness. Mindfulness is about creating a quiet mind. Because sometimes if you are alone in the room and it's maybe dark in the room, or you close your eyes and it's very loud because your brain is producing a lot of things. What are you doing here? Why are you sitting here? Have you cooked? Have you prepared this for tomorrow? Have you did this for yesterday? And that is, you know, and some people just can't stand it. They said, okay, they need to do something. But why? Why do you need to do something before you understand what you really want to do? And here is about coming with your quiet mind, coming to your intuition, understanding what you want to do. And there are some good examples of companies and persons who did that. That is Konosuke Matsushita. He created, after the Second World War in Japan, Matsushita Corporation, which is now, you know it from a company called Pioneer in Philips the company Philips in Amsterdam. He said once, no matter how deep a study you make, what you really have to rely on is your own intuition. And when it comes down to it, you really don't know what's going to happen until you do it. So it means most of the time you're making your decision based on your intuition. And I spoke with a professor in Germany from the Max Planck Institute. He once said to me, I'm consulting a lot of these big, large listed companies in Germany, the CEOs of these companies, and 80% of them said, I'm making my decision based on my intuition. And then I'm bringing, of course, the consultants and the other people in to justify what I just wanted to do in terms of numbers, so that I can go to the board and say, look, you know, my decision is not based on my intuition, my decision is based on that number and that number and that number. But at the end, the first one is your intuition. How can you train this? And how can a mental training program increase your understanding of your intuition and the world? How can you do that? There is a year-long mental training study to research the plasticity of the social brain. It has been undertaken by a professor of neuroscience with social behavior of the Max Planck Institute in Germany in Leipzig, Tanja Singer. And it was supported by the Max Planck Institute, of course, by the German government, by the EU. They did some money into it. And what they did is try to find out what are the external change agents in our society. How can we really change, becoming a more collaborative, cooperative, co-creative and social society and community? And they found out, you know, it's not our part to look into laws or nudging or institutional designs. We look into the mental training. What can we do? And what is the use for it? Why are we doing it? What did we observe in our societies? And they see strengthens psychological and physiological health. It can lead to avoid chronic stress. It can lead to prevent and fight against the burnout syndrome. It can lead, avoid or reduce social isolation. And it can lead to counteractive, elevate egocentricity. So to be a very egoistic person, it helps you to create something like that. Community, social competence, joy in life, cooperation, inner balance, stress reduction. If you're going deep into yourself, how much of those are you experiencing in your private and your business life? And is that something which couldn't be a good goal for you? Because that is why we're doing all the things. We're not doing it because having another 100,000, 50,000, whatever money in the door. We're doing it because of that. And another quick example from Google, when I came there, they had a big reorganization at Google in Dublin. And they brought the managers together and they said, oh, you know, we have to reorganize. I said, why? And they said, because we want to become a $100 billion company. And I said, why? That was quite irritating, this question for these folks. But I said, why not a 200 billion? Why not a 10 million? Why not a 1 million company? It's just a number with a lot of zeros behind it. It's just an imagination. It's not, money is nothing real. If you tell me what you do with that money, I tell you whether I'm inspired or not. I tell you whether I can go for you, go with that. But not just tell me a number. And this are the real things why we are doing what we're doing. But training is important. So it doesn't come if you just say, okay, I'm going to go for joy in life. Let's see and wait when it comes. That's not the way it works. So there is a core exercise to it, and the Max Planck Institute, they developed a secular exercise for training the brain and training your mindfulness and training your path to intuition. The first one is attention and interoceptive awareness. I'm sorry for this word, but it's more or less attention on the breath, understanding your body, how it functions, and getting first to know how does it work. If I'm sitting there doing nothing, just concentrate on my breath. They had actually 250 people in this study, and none of them had meditated before. None of them. And they were from 18 to 55. And they scanned their brain in between. They took some blood tests to check, their cholesterol and other ingredients. And they did some social behavioral tests as well. And they started with this attention into receptive awareness. Then they did a metacognition, that is the next one, the core exercise, perspective taking on self and perspective taking on others. Which means sometimes you might have recognized that when you are sometimes in the very relaxed mode. You are relaxed, you can go, time doesn't really matter. You go there, you're enjoying life, the sun, and sometimes you're in this mode of, okay, I have to do something, and you're going to a meeting and you don't even see your child or your husband or your wife. You're just passing by and said, oh yeah, hello, but you're passing by and going. So you're very concentrated on this. So that means if you look and there is a large variety of the different kind of inner parts in you. In the psychology, they call it who is driving the bus. So who is driving your behavior inside of you? Is it the inner judge? Is it the relaxed person? Is it the loving person? Is it the stressed person? And you can break it down. You can make a list of it. That's a good exercise sometimes to see who am I actually? Who is driving my behavior? And once you understand that, you understand the other part as well on the other side of the table, and you see, now and sometimes, you can say, okay, now when you have a friend and you say to him, now it's your inner judge, you're trying to judge me right now. Is that true? Get the relaxed person inside of you a little bit more stronger, then we might have a better understanding with each other. So you understand the other person much better. And they did an exercise on this. observing thoughts. They worked with partners to understand the inner part. Next core exercise is care, compassion, gratitude. It's pro-social motivation dealing with difficult emotions. That means there is a meditation technique which enables you actually to go to the empathy part or compassion part, strengthen that. So you not only understand the other, but you feel with the other. You understand what he or she might need at that moment of time. And then this is the design, I said it. So the training, brain plasticity, subjective well-being, so how do you feel? They measured that. They measured health components, and they measured behavior. They had after that 12 behavioral tests. They found out after 3 months the plasticity of your brain, so which means even over 50, which was a release for me, I have to say, whew, I can even train my brain. So it's like the brain is still kind of increasing, so it's growing in certain parts. And the parts are the parts of compassion and empathy, and they are not the same parts. There are different traits in your neurocortex. One is about compassion and one is about empathy. A friend of mine taught me, Alfred, a psychopath can be very empathetic, but he is certainly not compassionate. And so you can train these parts in your brain, and that's what they found out. Plasticity of your brain, and then they checked with 12 behavioral tests, which they did with them afterwards. Does this has an effect on your social behavior? And they found out, yes, it has. These people become much more social, much more empathetic, much more kind of perceptive of the other people around them. So they saw this and they say, that has an effect on communication, social intelligence. It has a positive effect on family and collaboration and community. The plasticity is going up, the brain plasticity. Stress is going down. Cooperation is going up, and emotion regulation is going up. So a difficult situation, better to cope with, better to understand, and staying creative even though it's a very difficult situation. At Google, for those who needs data, and Google definitely always needs data, they said, okay, we see if people do that, the innovation is going up. The perception for culture and creating culture by themselves inside their environment is going up. The retention is going up, means people stay longer with that company and not quitting immediately. And the productivity and high quality work is going up as well, because people are really for a long time very concentrated and they can do things. So it's going up as well. So they found that very interesting, and they have, there is also other companies like SAP, for instance, or so, who involved, these programs into their whole culture, company culture. So, but mindfulness, when I quit Google, about 2 years ago, I did it because I thought I can do much better for the world and use this kind of knowledge, experience and network to bringing transformation to the world. So it's not only to bring mindfulness to the world. Mindfulness is one tool, one part of it. But for us, it's important to understand in which world are we living, on the political level, on the company level, organization level, on the individual level. And how can we bring that together so that we can really be able to transform business, society, and self? So we're offering a flexible and overarching platform to host dialogues, transformation, and change initiatives, embracing a holistic perspective, which is, I think, needed in these times of volatility. And we deeply believe that consciousness and intuition are fundamental for global transformation. And we believe that conscious leaders have high levels of awareness and act with compassion to share their knowledge network, and experience with others. And these leaders are not only executives. These leaders can be found in all parts of our society. Sometimes when I'm doing coaching and I'm going to companies and they said, yeah, we want to have a culture change in our company because we have this problem and also innovation is stucking and we want to do something. I'm asking these people, who are the important people in your company? And they said, okay, this is the CEO, the CFO, the COO, the boof, 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 all the CCCCCs. And I said, okay, and if you're looking deeper into it, who are the really important people in your company? Which means, who are the people who are really important for others? And sometimes it could be the gatekeeper. Sometimes it could be the driver, because he knows a lot of these companies and he speaks with the people on a personal level and he has an influence of them. And I suggest always to integrate those people in these functions, actually, not only the roles, but the people who are important. So we believe that wisdom is a deep inner knowledge connected with the source of life. Wisdom is the language of your heart, it's honest, it's free, and it's the highest truth. In this space there is no right or wrong, so there's no judgment. In this space there's just a deep understanding of our existence. And if we come to that level, why are we here for? What are we doing? Not judging, this is right, this is wrong. Then we are ready for innovation, for creation. Then we're becoming really somebody who is enabling us to create our future and not being created. So, some ideas on projects. Let me see, oops. So what we do is conferences and wisdom talks. That are something where we inspire people. So we bring people together from all over the world. Scientists, artists, executives, spiritual leaders. And we bring them together to really understand, how do we want to live together, to work together, to see the world from different perspectives and initiate discussions. And we're doing communication, consultancy, we are building a network of partners, and we're doing retreats to help to initiate this process around the world. But it's not a business. Some people ask me, okay, what's your business model? I said, first of all, it's not a business. We are a non-profit or association. What we're doing is we're initiating change and we are supporting the transformation which is already happening. And that is our main goal. That is what we want to do. That doesn't mean that money cannot come into the door, but that is not our main focus. The main focus is transformation. So far what we did, Dublin, Costa Rica, Stockholm, Munich, Oslo. Now we're participating here in this conference. We're participating with Rasa in a conference. She brought me and my wife last year also to Russia, which was very nice. She did a conference there for Meaningful Business, which brought me and my wife to this part of the world, the eastern part of the world, which was an entrance, and I thank you for that, Rasa, to do that, which opened up a completely new, for us as well, an understanding of collaboration and different ways of how to see the world. And so we would like to participate and support those partners who are really have the same intention to work together on this transformation, because we need to work together. Besides conferences, we're doing communication, traveling, coaching, consulting. We are retreats, workshops, worldwide community and learning. But that is something we are working on, because as we said, we are non-profit, 2 years old, so we are just about to build it. So, what is wisdom together in you? I would like to plant this question in you, and please join us. And now I can, if I still have some time, do I? A 2-minute video. Let me see whether I can make it happen here. So it's a trailer of a movie called Human.
He said, you have to go back to your country. I said, where is my country? I don't have a country, man. It's a killing ground.
But at that moment, he wasn't a terrorist, he wasn't an insurgent, he wasn't an Iraqi. He was a scared man.
تقدر تسامحيني ده انا قتلت بيك او خيك وما في قانون حسبني بتسامحيني؟
Inventamos una montaña de consumo superfluo y hay que tirar y vivir comprando y tirando y lo que estamos gastando es tiempo de vida.
And then I met, to me, the love of my life. Their name was Jen, and gosh, it was just like my world changed.
Sumuling panin mo, ready nido.
So that's a film by Jan Arthus Bertrand, Human. You can see that in the internet, and let me see. Oops. Well, I'm not coming back to my presentation, but my presentation is anyway only saying thank you. So thank you.